very much.
Check, 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 check.
Thanks. And this is the advance. Great. Thanks. Okay, it's working. Okay. Thank you for that great introduction. And I can tell you there are, in this world, some easy jobs and some hard jobs. And if you're in fisheries, following Dr. Polly is not an easy job. So, yeah, bit daunting. So I am, very honored and grateful to be invited. Sorry, can you hear me? It's a bit hard for me to tell. Okay, great. I'm just going to try to pull it a little further. There we go. Very honored and grateful to be invited to be here today. And thank you to the SAWA people for hosting this event. I'm just very humbled the first half of the day hearing the stories. I could listen to those forever. And I guess I'll just get right into it. They only give us 10 minutes, not a whole lot of time. So many things I'd like to say, reflections and et cetera, but I'm sure we all have that, so I won't take up any more time. So I work for the David Suzuki Foundation, and I am the representative for the Pacific Marine Conservation Caucus that interacts or sits on the Integrated Herring Harvest Planning Committee. So in this role, I interact with DFO quite a lot, quite directly on herring issues. And I'll just get right into it. I had some feedback when I was getting ready for this talk. I had a lot of graphs, and I had some feedback. Just put some words on the slide, simple words. So in my interactions with DFO and then hearing, I meet, semi-regularly with some folks in this room, and I hear a lot. It's really obvious that there is just this disconnect. Here in the southern Strait of Georgia, it's indisputable that herring spawning has collapsed. I don't think anybody disputes that. DFO doesn't dispute that. At the same time, DFO's own stock assessments continue to show high biomass. And basically, it's because their stock assessments don't really care where the spawning happens. If it happens north in Nanaimo or south in Nanaimo, it's kind of all the same. It goes into the models and it spits out an estimate. And so this is what DFO science keeps seeing. It's what their models keep spitting out. And so that's the basis for their fisheries decisions. So that's really what they perceive. And I guess I want to get that across. Like, I do interact with these people, and they genuinely perceive this. At least they do to my face. That's what they say. While, of course, everybody here, I don't have to do the evidence. Luckily, I actually had a figure showing Dr. McKechnie's, that brilliant map of the archaeological sites, but I actually thought, he might show that, so I'm not going to put it in mine. Brilliant. I don't need to show anybody here the evidence of the collapse of spawning in the southern strait. So these two things, and they're just missing. They're just not connecting. So I've been wrestling with this, specifically wrestling with how to get DFO to realize that the decline in spawning, the collapse of spawning in the southern strait actually means something, that they can't just go about assessing the stock pretending that this hasn't happened or it doesn't matter. So that's some context. Yes, there we go. So this last few months ago, I was doing some basic background, looking at some data, and I noticed something, something that kind of got me interested. And so I fell down a bit of a rabbit hole. And where I quickly landed was looking at average latitude, so north-south, for spawning in the strait. And again, the central wrestling that I'm doing is trying to communicate to DFO that changes in spawning in the southern strait are meaningful and important, and they cannot be assessing or managing the fishery without taking those into consideration. So I quickly pulled this figure up, or generated this figure, and this is the average latitude of spawning in the strait year by year, not weighted for the size of the spawn, so treating each spawning event equally. And whatever, it's noisy, it bounces up and down, it's not really that impressive. I hope nobody's worrying about this too much, or trying to make sense of it too much. But if you kind of squint, it's like, okay, maybe there's something there. So then I did a 5-year running mean. So what this is the, for a given year, say 1955, that data point is the average of the average annual latitude for 1955, 54, 53, 52, 51, right? So it smooths out some of that interannual variability. And when I did that, I got this, and I was very surprised. I had no idea. I didn't know what to expect. I definitely didn't expect to see this at all. It floored me. I was like, yeah, calling people over in the office. So so this is new. I should have led off with this. This has not been published yet. The journal article we're just waiting on the map. Our GIS person is brilliant. It's hard to communicate these things in a map. This is going to be submitted very, very soon, so this is all preliminary. I have run this past some knowledgeable people, including DFO, for whom this was new information. They said that they'd never noticed this pattern before. So DFO has taken a look at this. I've run it past some other people, but technically this has not gone to a journal, not been through the peer review process, so please don't cite this yet. Don't take screenshots and start sharing it. Wait until the journal article comes out, because you never know what's going to be found in peer review, okay? But I think that what we see here, my interpretation, and again, this is open to interpretation because this is certainly new to me, is we have basically this repeating north-south oscillation pattern. So over the course of approximately 10 years, and it varies, but approximately 10 years, you have a northward trend in the 5-year running mean latitude, and it goes up, goes north, about 0.25 degrees latitude, which is about 25-ish kilometers straight north. But if you imagine on the actual coast of Vancouver Island, it translates to quite a bit longer. So then, and after that 10-ish years, then it comes back down south roughly the same amount, not quite as much, but then comes back down south roughly the same amount, and then does it again in the next 10 years, comes back down 10 years, and we see it repeated several times during the 70-year or seven-decade time series. So that's what you see. And then not only do you see that, but you also see this northward shift. So that's indicated by the dotted line here, which increases by about 0.2 degrees latitude over the course of the time series. And this is really illustrated by the fact that you see the southern minimums and the northern maximums tend to be further north every successive iteration, or every successive oscillation. So when they're going north, they're going a little further north each time. And when they're coming south, they're not going quite as far south. A little further north, not as far south. A little further north, not as far south. Now, the number of questions this opens up, many, many, many questions. One of them is, what is driving this? And your guess is as good as mine right now. I mean, we all have hunches. I certainly have my hunches. The blue line looks a lot like the sea surface temperature trend in the Strait of Georgia. And the oscillation, I immediately think of the Pacific Decadal Oscillation, which is a large-scale environmental fluctuation at the North Pacific that fluctuates at roughly the same kind of time scale. But again, this is all new. I just want to get this out so that people can really chew on this and start getting into it. So the other thing I noticed when I saw this is wow, this is so repeated, we might be able to model it pretty effectively. And so the top panel here, panel A, and again, please don't cite this yet, is this output of a model I put together. And so basically, it's a fairly simple model as far as these things go, because I'm not capable of doing anything more than simple. And it explains about 90% of the data variability in this time, so a pretty good fit. And that was pretty surprising to see. And then what you're able to do, or with some assumptions, is project that out into the future. And so that's what you see here on the bottom panel. So projecting into the future, if this pattern holds true, well, first of all, if it survives peer review, but secondly, if it holds true in the future, what might happen? And it continues to oscillate and also shift north. And again, this brings up a bunch of potential implications. One of them, or a couple of them, being the following. So the green line corresponds to the model's projection of when that next southern oscillation is going to happen, which is roughly 2030, or not roughly, it says 2030. That southern oscillation in 2030, because of the northward shift, if you look, it's almost parallel to the northern oscillation in 1964, 1965. So even at this next southern oscillation, it's only going to come down as far as the northern oscillation in the late 1960s, in mid-1960s. It's shifted that much. But really what I worry about when I look at this is that green line. I look at all the years that are underneath that green line, and I think, okay, if this model's true, if this really is going to happen, the center, the average spawning is not going to dip down back into where it was in those years. So whatever habitats, whatever dynamics, whatever conditions they encountered that supported the spawning in those years, supported the biomass, can we assume those are still going to be there going forward? Again, if it survives peer review, if it continues in the future, I don't know. And then flip side, you look on the other, that orange line, that corresponds with the peak of the 5-year running mean that we've seen in the actual data. So this is not the model, it corresponds to the peak in the data. And you can see that fairly soon the northern oscillations are going to be going above that. So they'll be going increasingly into areas that have not hosted the kind of the center, the average of the herring spawning before. So again, new conditions. Can we confidently know that spawning is going to be supported and is going to be as successful in those times as they were in previous years when they were further south? And I'd like to point out, and again, Dr. McKechnie's map here would be great to have up, the top 49.65, right about where the model projects it's going to go around 2075, that's pretty close to Comox. And if you looked on Dr. McKechnie's map, as I did before, there are no records necessarily northwest of Comox, but there are also no herring records northwest of Comox in there. And so I don't know, can they continue to just go that direction and be pushed perpetually? I don't know. And again, I'm going to be saying I don't know a lot. And if I get asked questions, I'll probably be saying I don't know, because this is new to me. And I'm still parsing through what this means and the implications. And I'm sure I'm forgetting some things I meant to say. But I know I need to wrap up. So here's some core messages, not all, but just some, again, preliminary. The north-south oscillation, it's subtle, so I should emphasize this. Herring spawn quite a bit, further north and south than that line. That's not the end-all and be-all. It's actually more, I don't want to use the word wobble, but it's almost like a wobble in the middle of the herring spawning. So it's like this. But it's consistent across decades. There were major changes, as we all know, in those decades. There was huge overfishing in the 60s with the reduction in fishery. There are major environmental changes in predation pressure, and yet that pattern appears really consistent. So it appears to be pretty durable. Combined with the northward shift, it might add some insight into why the spawning change in the southern strait has been so persistent. And again, it's apparently new to DFO, so they're hopefully going to have to deal with it. And I won't keep on reading. I've been told, don't read your slides. It's not good form. So you can read the rest. But I do think for this particular talk, what this means for localized subpopulations, again, I don't know. I'm just putting out there what I found, what I'm wrestling with, what I'm trying to get published right now. But I think that it is that's a major question. And maybe I'll just leave it there. Yeah. Thanks.